Good morning and welcome. We're glad you're here, and we want you to stay safe this next day or two as the hurricane comes into New Orleans. But it's not supposed to be that much for us. A little bit of rain, some of the outer bands. We are on the 2 o'clock side, so that means probably a little bit more than normal if we were on the 10 o'clock side. But I'm thankful it's not in South Florida. And I'm sorry for those in Louisiana and other areas, and I know you've been praying for them and are very aware of that. They have had lots of time, and hopefully they were able to evacuate those who knew the danger was greater than others. And usually on the coast they know that. We're beginning a new study today on Sunday morning. For a number of years, I have wanted to spend time with Jesus when the fall comes around and we're starting that last push to finish a calendar year. And we're doing that beginning today. We're going to spend time with Jesus, and we're going to take a closer look at the cross for the next several weeks. We're going to look at the word cross and the meaning behind it. We're going to look at the people who were around the cross. We're going to look at the ones who put Jesus on the cross. We're going to look at the 7 sayings of Christ on the cross. We're going to look at several aspects of the cross of Jesus Christ. And I guess we need to begin to understand that we have a very unique perspective on the cross. Many of us in times past, maybe not now, and some of you may wear a cross on a chain around your neck. And it's a silver or gold-plated cross. It's shiny, it's clean, it's attractive. And we have made the cross both glory and pain. There's a pain attached to it, but there's a glory attached to it. And so we'll analyze those things over the next several weeks. The classes will start new studies next week. I just needed to go ahead and start. I'd finished other studies, and it seemed like with the kids in school already, kids, I don't call children kids. Where did that come from? Children. They're not baby goats. But with our children in school, it just seemed like maybe it's okay for us to go back to school also. I've used and heard an expression many years of my adult life, the crux of the matter. When you hear that phrase, you're talking to someone in a context that you're getting ready to get something down to its smallest form, and you're about to make a simple analysis of maybe a larger problem. The crux of the matter is, and then you come up with some conclusion. Well, the Latin word for crux means cross. And our 7th grade grandson in Oklahoma studies Latin every day at school. And I laugh out loud when I think about when I do material and do references and find myself using Latin. Sheldon will be teaching me before long. The school he goes to, they study Latin every day. And he's learning Latin every day. So he'll do well in languages as he grows older. But the crux of the matter is the idea of the cross as we just described it. It has several aspects to it. It's a critical juncture or point in time, as you use that word. It's the crux of history when you think of the cross. It is very much in our thinking and very much in our vocabulary as we are Christians and think about it every day. We're going to go to the communion table later, and very likely 1 Corinthians 11, verse 26 will be read. And we'll go there in a moment. But when we come together on the Lord's Day, we declare His death until He comes again. As we take of those communion emblems, we declare His death on the cross until He comes again. And it's very much special and important and necessary for us. We live in a world with a lot of pain and suffering. And one writer suggested there are 4 longings within us because of that. There's 4 inner longings within an individual because of the pain and suffering in our world. We hunger for truth as lies proliferate. The hunger for love as hate rules the day. The hunger for justice as we see injustice mocking the law. And the hunger for forgiveness because we often fail and stumble. But think about that for a moment. Truth and love and justice and forgiveness. And that's found at the cross. It meets the 4 inner longings that's a part of us as human beings, not just as Christians. Some of those attributes are there outside of religious thinking, but certainly 4 longings that the cross meets. And we don't hesitate to mix the pain and the longing. We don't hesitate to, because the divine provides something for us. The divine is the answer to the restoration that we want and the sublime that we would like to enjoy. It's just the reality of that. But that's the paradox of the cross. Perfect peace and perfect justice became united in one death on a Friday afternoon. All of those things come together over 2,000 years ago. And remember the statement that the thief on the cross made on that occasion? We'll spend time with those 2 thieves at some point. He listened to another thief, and he knew and acknowledged that they deserved what they were getting. We deserve to be here. He doesn't. He doesn't deserve to be here. And that's the statement that was known then by most everyone, but they didn't have the courage to act on it. And it certainly is the reality coming to this very moment of our time that he did not deserve to be there. Nothing he had said, nothing that he had done, nothing that represented that cross could be associated with Christ, the man. It could not be associated with him. And the thief said what we say and what most people would acknowledge even today. He did not deserve to be on that cross. I'm reading 2 or 3 books at the same time I'm working on material. One of them is John Stott's The Radical Cross. And he says it's a radical thing. What was the attitude of people about a cross during the time of Christ? And I'm going to stop and let you think and perhaps respond. What was the attitude toward the cross? Yes, there's shame and reproach attached to it. If someone were to walk outside of the Jerusalem walls and look toward Golgotha, they would look there and they would think to themselves, anyone who would die there deserves it. It's the worst of people. If you were to ride by in the area of the vicinity, and it wasn't that close, but you could see it with your eyes, and see the vicinity of Golgotha, many times a Jew would spit on the ground and curse the place. They would proclaim a curse to whatever was in their mind toward the cross. The worst of sinners belonged there, and they were deserving of it. And to say those words and to acknowledge that Jesus Christ died on a cross is just a paradox that's really hard, even as we know it, for us to fully comprehend. But it's a radical thing. It's become a humdrum ornament for some. I see people wearing a cross, television shows, others, and the things they're saying and doing don't belie a person wearing a cross. When we were at MTSU as a campus minister, we put out a monthly newsletter. We were able to put newsletters into the mailboxes of over 2,000 members of the church there. When they registered, they were given the option of checking their church preference. And any of the student centers there, and I'm sure they still do it, were then sent a computerized list of all those who listed Church of Christ as their church preference. And of the 8,000 plus students then, many more now, 2,000 plus were affiliated with Churches of Christ. Many of them went home on weekends, so we didn't see them. But we had about 180 involved. But we put out a newsletter that we had put into those mailboxes free. We just had to put them together numerically so that it would be easy to distribute. And one of our students, older, had some money in his family, volunteered to help us put a Sunshine logo across a white T-shirt. And that was the name of the newsletter, Sunshine, S-O-N. And he suggested, why don't we go on campus? We could sign up for a table and put it out free and just have some T-shirts to sell. It was a very attractive T-shirt, and pass out some of the newsletters. Several months later, one of the students made this comment. I wonder if anyone's wearing that T-shirt representing us doing things they ought not to be doing. And what would be your answer if someone asked that hypothetical question that wasn't even asking for an answer? Probably. They liked the color perhaps, but they weren't living the way we would have wanted them to live, wearing that T-shirt representing Christ, but also representing the Middle Tennessee Christian Center. That cross has the same aspect attached to it. And so it's just a reality that we wish people would see it and respond appropriately and act accordingly with the cross across their chest, or maybe on a shirt, or at the back with the logo, whatever it would be. We would only hope so. But the other part of it is the need for the cross today. Is there a need for a cross today? In your thinking? Does the world still need redemption? Do we still need a message telling people what the cross means? Even if it's not a popular necklace or a popular symbol, the world still needs the cross. The world still needs to understand what it represents. And even if it's past tense for a lot of people, it's still a necessary subject matter for us today. People need to know that someone died on the cross. And on that cross, they took our sins upon them. And we have a hope as we respond to that resurrected Savior. It wasn't just the cross, but to that resurrected Savior, we have so much to be known in our thinking day by day. Why is that picture lifted before us as Paul remembered the words of Jesus in that upper room as he instituted communion, the Lord's Supper? That tells us, and it shows us and reminds us that we still need that today. When you're studying with someone who doesn't have much history as it speaks to religious matters, God, Christ, Bible, it's a difficult thing for them to understand when you make a simple statement. We hear it. I'm not sure we know how to explain it properly, but we say it and hear it often. He was on that cross for my sins. Or saying it slightly different, my sins put him on that cross. And they don't have any comprehension of what in the world are you talking about. I wasn't alive then. I did not live then. How could my sins put him on that cross? And how do we explain that? Yes. Yeah. It's God's love for all of generations. I use it this way. It dealt with those in the past, those who lived without the law, because there were many years where God's law was not in place. And then those who lived under the law, and that would come to the present time because the law was still in effect when Christ went to the cross. And then all of those to come. All of those to come who would live under the new law, the new covenant. And yet then, as I depicted that many years ago at a devotional at the Student Center as a student, what have I just shown? Someone with their arms outstretched, nailed to a cross. Past, present, and future. Still doesn't make it easy to understand, but that's the power of what God made possible and put into effect, so that the new covenant only put into place upon his death on the cross was also covered by what he did on the cross. And of course, that's the only way it affects us. We weren't alive beforehand, before the law. We weren't alive under the law during that time. So anyone today, the 50, 60, 70 years from the cross, would go back to that new covenant and understand that the old covenant was nailed to the cross, and upon his death, the curtain was rent asunder. We'll look at those events probably toward the end of December, and we'll realize what took place on that occasion. But we still need the cross today, and we still have it in effect today. Redemption is still alive and well. But it points to an event many years ago. We don't relate to it from the standpoint of that's not a form of punishment, capital punishment, if you will. I know if you watch the news at all around Easter weekend, in the Philippines for decades there are men who will be nailed to a cross symbolizing the death of Christ on a cross. And there will be blood coming out of their hands. They aren't left to die, but they go through that ritual so as to depict what Christ did. And of course, the resurrected Christ on that weekend. But so that's the only way that we, with some regularity, see someone with nails in their hands to be put upon a tree, a cross. And it's representative of what took place, not actually what would take place today, of course. But we still need the cross. Redemption is alive and well, and it's still needed by individuals. So that word and the meaning behind it should be part of our instructions to others, and certainly our reminder to ourselves. I want to read a couple of comments. Jesus was crucified not in a cathedral between two candles, but on a cross between two thieves. What's the reason behind that comparison? George MacDonald made it a number of years ago. What would you suppose was the reasoning for him to say that? Because in religious circles, it's become a caricature, if you will, of lighting candles and not having nearly the meaning that it should have. Every once in a while, and I watch Blue Bloods. I've watched it for a number of years on Friday night, wondering if it's going to come on again. But every once in a while, because they are a Catholic family in that very popular sitcom, ideas of the Catholic Church will come up. Sometimes things I've heard and known from the past, but sometimes a few new ones. And every once in a while, they'll reach into a pocket, depending on who the character is, and they'll pull out a coin. St. Christopher's coin, and they will name different supposed saints in the Catholic Church. And they'll give that coin representative of a saint in the Catholic Church for good luck, or it's a reminder to pray. It has some religious function in the Catholic thinking, and to share it is to share that thinking with an individual. That becomes a caricature. It's a coin. And they've attached a meaning behind it. And when you hear from time to time that the Pope is ready to make someone a saint, and they've asked people to give them accreditation so that they can appropriately realize that this person earned sainthood, it's based upon proof of a miracle. Someone has performed a miracle, and it's attested to by individuals, and in that religious group they can then accredit him or her to be a saint. I just shake my head. I just shake my head when I see those things being put out into the news media. Gilbert Chesterton said the cross cannot be defeated, for it is defeat. What did the cross end, if you will, or what did it reveal as far as using that word defeat in our understanding? I've heard it said, we don't know if it's true, but I can see that it could have been, that when Christ died, angels wept in heaven and Satan celebrated in hell. What did they think had happened with that observation, were it to be actual? The end of Christ. Yes. Yeah, we've won. We've put him to death. The Jews, it's over. This impostor is dead. May Judaism reign forever. And anything else that was in place as it related to what they thought they were accomplishing. Roddy's going to begin, and I hope you'll be here to study with him on Wednesday night week, the book of 1 Corinthians. And the wisdom of the cross is part of that first chapter, and part of that second chapter is the realization that if they had understood what it meant, they would not have crucified the Son of Glory. If Satan had understood what would take place upon his death and what would happen to this very moment at Cedar Grove Church of Christ, he never would have wanted that to occur. He never would have induced the hearts and minds of people to bring it about. He thought he'd won. They thought they'd won. And when did they find out they did not win? What's the great act of God that revealed to the world from that moment forward who Christ exactly was? The resurrection. The resurrection. Yeah. Up from the grave he arose. And it was made sure that a number of people saw it. Individuals, small groups. 1 Corinthians 15, as many as 500 at one time. And why was the resurrection so important? What yells at us? What is revealed to us to understand it?
That God is God.
To acknowledge that that was God in the flesh. And his body didn't stay in the grave, in that borrowed tomb. The power over death. And that power is still available for us. We don't let the resurrection have the effect it should. When we're very timid in our belief structure and in our faith and depending and trust in God, we just don't let the power of the resurrection have nearly the purpose or the goal, if you will, that it should. The power of the resurrection is alive and well to this very moment for every one of us as we live life 24/7. And so in a similar way, the cross, but then the resurrection, and they're attached, most definitely. Another individual, Charles Spurgeon, there will be no crown wearers in heaven who were not cross bearers here below. And where does that come from? We'll look at it later, the admonition of Jesus to take up my cross. Take up my cross and bear it daily. Now, what does that mean? It's not symbolism of a jewelry hanging around our neck, or maybe even a symbol around a ring. I've seen those in recent years. Several crosses in a band that you can buy. Taking up that cross is to take upon ourselves the shame and the suffering, if you will, that was placed upon Christ, of our willing to be put to shame for our beliefs, for our willing to do anything, everything required of us, even until death, if we take up His cross daily. It's very real and very meaning in our life. Vance Havner said we need men of the cross with the message of the cross bearing the marks of the cross. And not in a literal sense, bearing the marks of the cross, but spiritually speaking, or metaphorically, yes, to be willing to put our old self to death, to bury the old man and woman, to be raised, resurrected as Christ was resurrected. Put to death. Grave clothes, grace clothes, Paul talks about. Take off the grave clothes and put on the grace clothes, metaphorically, as he talks about characteristics there. Samuel Rutherford, Christ's cross is such a burden as sails are to a ship or wings to a bird. What's he saying? A ship using the wind depends upon a sail. A sailboat, others. A bird wishing to traverse across his world must have strong wings. And individuals today, if we are to be what we want to be day by day, the cross of Christ is there as a motivator, as one to give us impetus, if you will. The cross of Christ. He came to pay a debt he didn't owe because we owed a debt we couldn't pay. We don't know who made that statement, as some have tried to find it in history. We have a song written about it. We have sung other similar words, that he paid a debt that we simply could never pay. And yet we find it in our spiritual structure today of even members of the body of Christ having to get over the idea that they have to earn their way, that they're earning something rather than receiving and then being appreciative for what God has already done for them. We're not earning grace. If that were the fact, we'd never get it. But when we're given grace, as we respond to what God has done for us through Christ, we are appreciative. We're expressing our gratitude for what He's done for us. That's why we're here today. That's why we're living as we should live. We're grateful. And it should be considered, at least, I don't have the ability to know it, but it should be considered, at least, if there are those who wear the name of Christ who don't live as they should, forsaking the assembly, not doing the things they should day by day, not being an example at home or in the community. Make your list. They don't appreciate what's been done for them. They don't have the gratitude that they should, because how could you have the gratitude for what God has provided that we could never provide for ourselves and not do the things, as small as they are, as simple as they are, that God has asked us to do as His light, salt, or leaven. How could we not be that salt, light, and leaven, knowing what He's done for us that we could never do for ourselves? So it has several ways to affect us. The old cross slew men, the new cross entertains them. The old cross condemned, the new cross amuses. Now, that's taking a very jaded look at people who see it as jewelry only. We have a cross in our building. It's on the end of every pew. Are we taking up our cross when we leave this building? Are we living for Christ as we should? If we're making the effort, and we're not going to do it perfect, don't ever think that I'm suggesting that. That's the thing I repeated most the first month or two that we were here. Don't ever take it for granted, though. And the symbol is here to remind us, to propel us forward, if you will, when we leave this building. If this is where the reminder is there. I go from time to time to different church virtual learning sites. I have about 7 that I go to just to see what they're doing, see how they're doing. We don't have the abilities that some of them have because of the equipment they have compared to ours. But I just kind of look and notice, well, they've got the same table that I've seen most of my life. The same communion table. This do in remembrance of me across it. I was with a group of men a number of years ago when we were moving into a new building, and it was time to pick furniture. And they were trying to decide whether or not in choosing wooden furniture, and by the way, the Dalraida congregation has the exact style that we had at West Broward, the exact pulpit, the exact table. But I remember asking the question, do we want to pay extra to have this do in remembrance of me across the communion table? And it wasn't really discussed. It was as if, well, of course we must. It wouldn't be a communion table without it. And I kind of felt the same way. I attended then as I do now. I watch and listen and learn to see where elders or others think, see what guides their decisions. It helps me to understand them better. What's the motivation or what's the thinking behind this? Money, in that case, I was thankful it didn't take much discussion, and what little it cost. You know what took longer than anything else? I'm going to chase a rabbit for just a moment. I know you're deadly curious. Do you know what took longer than anything else for them to decide about the furniture for an auditorium? Was whether or not they would have communion cups at the back of the pew. And it took 15 or 20 minutes of talking, and they hadn't really come up with an answer. And yes, it would cost more. I asked this question, are we wanting people to have to go around and collect the empty communion cups on the back of the pew after service is over? Oh, no. Then there's your decision. Oh, yeah. If you don't provide it, they've got to put it back in the tray. Easy answer. Easy answer. But they had to work through it to come to that understanding. What are you asking otherwise? If they don't put it back in the tray, which we'd done in the other building, and you're providing a place for it, they're going to put it in the provided place. But anyway, enough of that. The old cross destroyed confidence in the flesh. The new cross encourages it. Now that, again, is a jaded outlook, but it's the reality that some people romanticize the cross and don't apply or remember and let it have an effect upon how they act. how they move forward in their decisions. I found an interesting 6-paragraph statement in doing research some time ago. I want to read it to you. I found it to be somewhat profound. The government of Polish Prime Minister Zalewski, and that's not a good pronunciation, had ordered crucifixes removed from the classroom walls, just as they had been banned in factories and hospitals and other public institutions. Catholic bishops attacked the ban that had stirred waves of anger and resentment all across Poland. Ultimately, the government relented, insisting that the law remain on the books, but agreeing not to press for removal of the crucifixes, particularly in the schoolrooms. But one zealous communist school administrator in Garwolin decided that the law was the law. So one evening, he had 7 large crucifixes removed from large halls where they had hung since the school's founding in the 1920s. Days later, a group of parents entered the school and hung more crosses. The administrator promptly had these taken down as well. The law is the law. The next day, 2/3 of the school's 600 students staged a sit-in. When heavily armed riot police arrived, the students were forced into the streets. Then they marched, crucifixes held high, to a nearby church where they were joined by 2,500 other students from nearby schools for a morning of prayer in support of the protest. Soldiers surrounded the church, but the pictures from inside of students holding crosses high above their heads flashed around the world. So did the words of the priest who delivered the message to the weeping congregation that morning. His simple message, there is no Poland without a cross. How would that apply today? There is no communion without a cross. Do you have to have the words? No. But isn't it a good reminder? There's no church gathering place, church building, without a cross. Do you need it at the end of the pews? Do you need it somewhere projected? Not necessarily, but it's a good reminder. There's no church without a cross. There is no, and you fill out your family name, there is no Davenport family without the cross. And you apply that to your family. It's everything to us. The meaning is so rich and profound, and we must not ever act as if it's some piece of jewelry without meaning. And I would say if you never wear a cross on a chain around your neck, and I'm not suggesting you must, not suggesting you shouldn't, but it needs to be present in our thinking. And whatever it takes for that to occur, it needs to take place. There is no church without a cross. I would suggest that I'm not going out on a limb to say it. I don't think there is an America without a cross. There's no America without a cross, because our form of government and so many things are based upon God, and that's who He was about. Terry? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's the meaning of the cross. The symbol doesn't have to be there, but does it hurt?
It's like taking the prayer out of school. Well, we can still pray in school. We can still pray at every meeting and ball game. Do it. Pray.
Well, as long as there are tests being given, there will always be prayer in schools.
Right. And we can
I've always believed that.
have the cross.
As long as
Don't need the symbol.
as long as matter, Athletes will be praying before that contest. That's just a fact. That's
It's important to realize we don't need this symbol.
right. And that's what I
We
hope.
don't worship this symbol.
That's what I've said, I think, several times. So, if we never wear it, it needs to be there. It needs to be there with meaning in terms of our thinking, our attitudes, who we are. Sammy? I think it's a useless or a needless fight because he did die on a cross. But we don't worship the Christ on the cross. We worship the resurrected Savior. But the cross was part of it. And we can't divorce one from the other. It's like the fight that we had for 2 or 3 years in South Florida of someone who did want us to think about the birth of Jesus at any point in the calendar year. We could not sing "Tell Me the Story of Jesus," and one verse talks about his birth within 30 to 60 days of December 25th. Do you need to accent it more than necessary to suggest something that's not genuine? Of course. You don't want to do that. You don't want to accent something that we don't believe is the case. But to ignore that it happened, to ignore that he died on a cross, that's the meaning. That's the meaning that the cross has for us. Roddy?
In connection with that, the birth of Christ was celebrated in the Scripture. Read it again.
Yeah.
It was a joyous thing.
Yeah.
Without the birth of Christ, the cross couldn't have happened.
Right? Yeah.
And I'm not saying by any sense of the word to promote any day as Christ.
Correct.
That's not the intent of the story.
Yeah.
The intent of the story rests
Yeah. And we'll talk about,
without the other.
at some point, probably 3 weeks away at this point, but at some point we'll want to fully understand incarnate. What does incarnate mean? God in the flesh, John 1, verse 14. God became flesh. What does that mean? How is that something that we explain to people? But it's necessary to understand the cross, to understand who put him there, and what had to take place for that man named Jesus, born of Nazareth. What had to take place for that to occur? We need to talk about it at some point. But absolutely, we don't ever want to romanticize something that has deep, deep meaning. And we must fight that with any urge that we can. If something we've said or something that we might do is making it no more than a piece of jewelry. That's, I guess, the point. Terry, do you have another comment?
Just as we must not keep him in the manger. We must let him grow up in our lives.
Yeah.
We must not keep him on the cross bed. We must let him raise from, into life and be in life in our lives.
Yeah. And it's a side point at this point, but we also need to let him live. How do we know what it means to be Christ-like, Christian? That's the idea of that word. Well, we see his life. So we need to let him be born, but we also need to let him incarnate and live before he went to the cross. And that will be some of what we'll touch on too. Charles Hodge was criticized. I didn't hear him say this, but I saw him write it. He was criticized for spending more than a week or two preaching on the cross a number of years ago. And he said, "I do not apologize for studying the cross of Jesus Christ." And I have to tell you, it changed my life again. And as he talked about the Duncanville congregation where he was minister, he said it changed the life of our congregation again. I don't know what effect it will have on us as we spend time with Jesus and take a closer look at the cross, but it's going to have some meaning for us. Any study we should engage in reminding us and spending more time with anything to do with Jesus Christ should change us. It should remotivate us, if you will. It should recharge us, to use another word. But the cross, it has the ability to change us again if we'll fully let it. Roddy?
I was just thinking, the cross. Paul said, if these things aren't so, we've all men are most miserable. And that statement fits right there on the cross.
Yeah.
If Christ had not been who he said he was, could not do what he said he could do, then
Yeah.
you just sized it up where we could be.
Yeah. Yeah, if Christ did not raise, talking to the Sadducees who did not believe in the resurrection, if Christ was not raised, we're still in our sins. And we're to be a most pitiable people, to use an old translation. We're to be most pitied. Thank you for your interest, and read about, think about, song leaders, let's sing about the cross. We're going to be on that subject matter for quite a while. Let's sing some songs about the cross as we spend time with Jesus. Thank you.
We were talking about a t-shirt. Worked for a company one time,